The Sega Saturn is home to some very interesting games, yet a lot of them are very rare and yet unknown because most of them, for many, were only released in Japan. Among them would be a series of racing games, and what's interesting is the fact that during this period, like this and even with the 6th generation of consoles, were probably the most innovative in terms of development practices, ideas and willingness to take risks, to try something new and different that was out there, that was never seen before and pretty much we've never seen yet since in many cases, but I suppose they did influence the few. One of the games in question here is an interesting racing game under the name of Koda that released for the Sega Saturn in 1998 in Japan only, and would act as an adventure racing game. But what's interesting with this here is not only is it a racing game, it's also a manga visual novel styled dating game with an adventure style story mode. But to put into more context, yes, it does have a very in-depth story as you get familiar with a variety of different characters that will take you through the narrative of the main game's campaign, but all of the text is in Japanese, so unless you understand the language it will be very hard to figure out really what's going on. So if you do decide to play through the story mode from the beginning, just be mindful that it will take a very long time to get into a race, because you have to go through dialogues of screens and texts and choice based options, and again because of the language barrier can make it difficult to really know which is the right option to choose in order to progress the story that will lead on to an inevitable race, which you will get after some time. I haven't sat down to play it myself. I was messing around with the story mode trying to figure things out, and while the visual details on display are stunning, very much in a manga comic book style format and look really cool, but it took almost 15 minutes before I was able to get into a race because there was just so much dialogue and text and just visual screens that kept appearing. For me, I was nearly ready just to throw in the towel and stop playing it altogether, but eventually I did get into a race. It just depends on some of the choices, because at certain sections you will be given options to choose between a select few scenarios, some of which will progress the story, some of which will take you to different screens that you can upgrade or make adjustments to your car settings and so forth, and then others will take you to the memory card screen where you can save your progress in the story. But once you do get into a race, more often than not you're usually racing alone on the track, because your goal is to kind of like in a rally set stage where you're tasked and your main objective is to literally beat the quickest times on the screen against someone else who's already set a previous time. So in all sections you want to make sure that you have the quickest time, plus there's also drifting elements in it as well, so you'll get more points based off of the unique drifts that you can take around certain drift points or sections throughout each course. But you must also be mindful of your surroundings, because you don't want to hit anything or hit any barriers or walls, because that will take points off you. So these elements all couple into the dynamic of the story, because they can work with you or against you depending on the dating scenarios that you'll find yourself in, because the girls in question will either like what you're doing or they'll hate what you're doing and they won't want anything to do with you. So yeah, a lot of it really comes down to your overall skill level in the game. But if you don't have the patience for that, there are different modes available. You do also have a time attack mode and a battle mode, and the battle mode essentially is multiplayer, so you can play split screen with someone else and you can have two 2 cars on the track at the same time, so you can play against friends, which does add more appeal to the game, if I'll admit. You can also change between different customization elements of the cars, between the suspension, brakes. You can change between automatic, manual transmission. The time attack mode is very similar to the race sections within the story, but you can jump straight into the tracks from the game. And there is a few in total. There's 3 main tracks to begin with, but you can race them in different points from both reverse and the standard format. Generally with the story based tracks, when you're racing, it can change the dynamic between racing in the day and even at night, so it will have different visual elements and weather effects depending on what time of the day that you're racing, which is pretty cool. But when you're playing the time attack modes, it's essentially the same thing. You have to drift around corners, try to gain the most amount of points. You'll have all of the elements on screen to let you know how you're getting on, so the goal essentially is to be the quickest around the track while also gaining the highest amount of score possible, which will take a while to do. But the handling physics in the game are not bad. If anything, they're quite impressive, especially for an early game of this type and what it's trying to do. Graphically, it wouldn't be as good as other games maybe on the Sega Saturn, or even if you compare it to other games that would have been seen on the PlayStation around that time, but it's unique in what it tries to do. Plus you do have a selection of really cool Japanese cars, although graphically they are visual representations of it, but they may not have the same level of detail compared to other racing games. Like you have the Datsun 240Z equivalent that would also be seen in the main intro of the game, especially when you boot it up. But then you have the Toyota Corolla AE86, Toyota Supra, there's different variants of the Nissan R32 Skyline GTR, there's a Honda Civic, Toyota MR2, and there's a couple of other cars in there as well. While it's not groundbreaking in terms of its overall selection, the selection that is there is very cool. There's some really cool cars in there worth trying out, and they all have their own different handling dynamics and physics. Some are faster than others and vice versa. Some are much larger and aren't as suitable to shorter or narrower tracks, which will take a lot more skill and patience in order to master them. But that's just the fun of the experience, to be honest. Even with driving, you do have 2 different view modes, either like first person or behind the car, so there's different play dynamics, and the car will feel very different depending on which view you choose to use in the game. No, it's interesting. I have to say it's different from a lot of other games out there. It's very unique, I will say that, especially with regards to the story mode. But I think where it's best tied is definitely in the time attack or even the battle mode. That's where you'll have the most fun, because it's easy to pick up and play. You don't have to wait around for ages to get into a race. But still, yeah, it's very cool. It's a reflection of its time. It's very rare, and this game can still only be found on the Sega Saturn, so that'll tell you how unique and rare it is. And I would recommend you give it a try, especially if you like rare and obscure Japanese racing games. And plus it's one of those elements that also implements Touge style racing as well, because you're racing around windy, narrow, mountain based tracks as you play. So if you're into that sort of thing, which is a very cool vibe for racing games, yeah, I would recommend you give this one a go. But if you're into the story element of it, well, it has that for you as well. It won't be to everybody's taste, I will admit, but it's there. And if it's not what you're into, well, the other modes are there that you can pick up and play very easily if that's something you're into. And yet this is just one of the many interesting and quirky racing games that were released in Japan for the Sega Saturn that still a lot don't know about even to this day, that are also worth checking out, which we will do so here in this next video.